Yes, indeedy, folks. It's the Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Signs of our times. Another cranky look at the fact that it's all going to heck in a handbasket. Although your beer drinking guide might think this might be a encouraging gift to the future. And this has been another tour of Signs of Our Times. Proof positive that, hey, if it's going to heck, maybe the handbasket is the best ride you can get. Let's drive Moab. I took a drive down to Moab in March of 2007. It was a nice time to be there. It was overcast and cool, a great time to go out and check things out. In previous episodes, we've looked at the great drive down to Moab. We went on a little drive down Highway 279 down the river. We've gone out and checked out Dead Horse Point, a Utah state park, and we've also checked out Canyonlands National Park. On our last drive Moab, we began driving upriver up Highway 128. One of our stops, just a few miles up Highway 128, was this spot where I noticed this very amusing and elegant and beautiful particular rock formation. It was such a stunning feature in a whole landscape of stunning features that I stopped and got several different angles on it. A little further up the road, I found a place to pull over and enjoy looking at a close-up of the river. Some tributaries to the Colorado River have been dammed before this point, and they provide a more even flow of water. But for the most part, the Colorado River itself, this amazing river that drains a quarter of the United States area, is not dammed before this point. I found myself looking at the springtime flow of the Colorado River and thoroughly enjoying just the movement of the water. You know how rivers are. They're so intoxicating just by the way they move. And thoroughly enjoying the sound of the river. And I was not producing a TV show at the time of this, but I had been thinking about it. And I was thinking it would sure be nice to show the sound and the feel of the river. Well, when I had decided to go on this tour, on this trip, I had gone exploring through the newspaper, and I had found that they had come out with a nice camera, the size that I am interested in when I travel, that had a real nice optical zoom on it. So I had talked myself into a new digital camera for this trip. As with any new tool, I have a tendency to settle into using them the way that you always have used the old tools. But I was looking at this river and thinking, well, I'll take a picture or two of it. And in fact, you just saw the 2 pictures that I took. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. This is a modern camera. You not only can take still pictures with it, you can take movies with it. So maybe if I want to show the movement of the water and the ripple of the water and the sound of the water, perhaps what I should do is take a movie. Who knows? It might work out. Well, you have seen movies made on my camera since then, that I have made this year since I began producing these movies. And indeed, you saw an earlier movie when we were looking at Oregon and a drive in Oregon. But this right here is the first time that I told myself, well, why be a stick in the mud and treat your modern camera as if it only does what your old-fashioned cameras did? So, folks, here is where I finally woke up and took my very first movie with my new camera so that I could share it with a perhaps sometime in the future television show. So, how's that for some very fancy-dancy television making? In contrast to the very sophisticated techniques of making television, my next stop up the road found the rather primitive outdoor facilities that are along this road. I guess where it's hot and dry, you don't have to worry about making your outdoor facilities open-air affairs. Pulling back on the road after enjoying this rather open experience, I noticed ahead some very nice windy roads, just exactly the sort of thing that I love to drive. Once again, I found myself thinking, gee, it sure would be nice to do something other than just say how windy these things are. And then, once again, I remembered that my camera does movies, and I pulled over and began the very first of what, yes, you've seen before, folks. It's the amazing Car Cam! Car Cam! Car Cam! Very sophisticated. Remember, kids, don't try this at home. Car Cam! And with that, let's go for a little drive up the Colorado River Gorge. This is about a 35 to 45 mile an hour road. this little stretch, the road has gotten quite a bit above the river. It's rather a steep bank down to the river. And for some reason, the cameraman on this project got to where he was paying more attention to keeping the car on the road than making sure that the camera was showing some of the road while it was showing the scenery. I'm just going to have to talk with that guy. Where I pulled over to let a truck pass and put away the camera, I found this lovely little plant. And from where I pulled over, the canyon pretty well finished there and began to open up into a wide, wide valley, so wide that you could begin to see the snow peaks that surrounded us. The little community you see here is the Red Cliffs Lodge. Very interesting museum, a lovely spot. We'll be looking at the Red Cliffs Lodge on our drive back down Highway 128. I was on this journey in March, the last week of March, and seeing the snow on these amazing desert formations really added a nice accent to it. And here, with Highway 128 stretching off into the distance, we're going to leave our drive Moab this week, and we'll come out and check out the rest of this amazing drive soon. And now, folks, let's talk a little bit about your beer drinking guide and his phenomenal sense of fashion, shall we? I'm sure that if you've been watching my shows, you know that I am pretty well the pinnacle of the latest deal on fashion. My goodness, I just spend, other than the time that I spend dedicated to you, dear watchers, I spend all my time dedicated to fashion magazines, and anytime Abercrombie and Finch, or whatever their name is, says to jump, I just go down and buy 2 or 3. I'm sure you can tell. Well, the fact is, even a guy with my sense of clothing does get to where springtime rolls around, and once every 5 or 6 years, whether you need to or not, you just decide, it wouldn't hurt to buy a new pair of shorts for this year, just so that I feel like I'm doing something different for a change. So this year was one of those years. Just decided I needed a good pair of shorts. So I started looking through the advertisements, and there were shorts and there were shorts, and I looked at different sales, and in my looking for it, one of the big box stores which I won't mention by name, but it starts with a letter somewhere between J and L, I think. We They had an advertisement in there for some shorts, and they were plaid shorts. Well, folks, I have never worn plaid pants other than for pajamas in my life. And there's always the joke about the golfers, the guys that are, oh, that's right, just about my age, that go out in their plaid golf shorts or their plaid golf pants. So I thought, I guess I've earned the right to wear plaid pants. And more than that, I don't know, there was just something snappy about them. I liked them. I thought, I think that I will get plaid pants. Plus, the price was good on them. So I went out to this big box store, and I went and I found the plaid shorts, and I went in and I tried them on, and they fit okay, and so I went up to the counter. Well, here behind the counter is this lovely young lady, I would say 22, 25, somewhere in there. And I walk up with my plaid pants, and I put them on the counter, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, this gal's thinking, well, here's a grandpa buying plaid pants. But instead, she says, oh, plaid shorts, I love these. I wish I could get my husband to buy them. And I said, you wish you could get your husband to buy them? She says, oh, yes, they're all the fashion now, Well, there you go. I'm just ahead of the curve in the styling game. That would be me, your beer-drinking guy. So, just to show you how spiffy I've been this summer, here's your beer-drinking guide in his fancy pants. Eat your heart out, Justin Timberlake. Every TV producer lives just to make their TV audience proud of them. And I am working to know that this makes you proud of your beer drinking guide. He's styling. It's time for Train Story. The railroads are what opened up the West. The distances were far too great before the trains. Once these horizontal ladders were built across the country, produce, products, everything else could get to the West and from the West. The train stories I find to tell you will be, as far as I know, all true. Now, I wasn't there, but I'm using what I consider reliable sources. Even so, it's possible that some of these stories are true and or tall. Train Story. In our train stories, we honor those who built this network upon which our civilization here in the Desert West stands. Today's train story involves a train that looked just about like this. This story comes probably from the 30s, maybe the 20s or the 40s. But it would be a train just about like this, a big old full-time steam engine on the Oregon Short Line, main line of the Union Pacific Railroad, pulling boxcars just about like this picture here. One thing to remember about these trains is that the engineer sat way back behind the boiler. We've got a little arrow on him there. So in order to see down the track, he had to look all the way down that boiler, which of course meant that the boiler was in his way. For just a quick little illustration, we can take this gentleman driving a train that was a generation or two before the train we're thinking of and look at his angle of vision. With the yellow line representing what he can see, you can see that he's pretty limited in his ability to see the track up close to the train. Indeed, in these old steam engines, the engineer was looking, I don't know, could be as much as a quarter of a mile down the track before he saw the track. With this limit of vision in mind, let's go to Glenns Ferry, Idaho. As I remember, this story happened right around Glenns Ferry. Glenns Ferry is where trains would stop and pick up water. It was an important stop along the Oregon Short Line. And it was while a train was slowing down to stop at Glenns Ferry that today's story happens. So here's this great big steam train pulling a long load of cars, long, heavy freight cars. And it's coming into Glenns Ferry. It has started to slow down, but it still has plenty of speed behind it. Maybe going, 40 miles an hour or so, but that's completely conjecture. I don't know. But it was coming down the track, and the engineer looked ahead, and he saw this guy sitting on the track. And the guy was sitting there with a bottle. Obviously, he had been drinking all day. He was sitting there on one rail, looking toward the other rail, just sitting there having a nice time. Well, the engineer started blowing the horn like crazy, and he slammed on the brakes. So you've got a whole train with every wheel locked up. Now, steel on steel is the most efficient way to move things on land. However, it doesn't give you much traction once you start to slide. It's just a great big old slide with the train going along on it. They were blowing the horn. They were making as much noise as they could. The fireman was out yelling. They were doing everything they could to get this guy's attention. Well, he just sat there completely oblivious. And it got to where they couldn't see him anymore because of that huge space that you can't see in front of a train. They just kept sliding, and they got to the point where he had been, and they kept sliding, and they slid about 4 or 5 cars past where he had been before finally the train came to a rest. So the engineer starts shutting down the train, getting the fire under control, making it so that the train will be safe when he jumps off. And in the meantime, the fireman jumps off the train and runs around to the front of the train to see, oh my God, can I help this guy? Well, the guy isn't there. He was hoping, of course, that the guy had been caught up in the cow catcher and maybe hurt, but at least alive. Well, the guy wasn't on the cow catcher, and he looked around and it didn't look bloody, and he didn't see any parts or pieces that had been run over or smashed. He looked under the train. He thought, well, maybe he's under the train. He did everything he could to try to figure out what happened to this guy. Well, he then looked back up the track, and there was the guy laying beside the rail. And what the fireman didn't know at the time was that at the last minute, this guy had looked up. The train was coming. He didn't try to get up or jump out of the way. Instead, he had been sitting like this on the track, and he just rolled over backwards and down the embankment that the ballast makes when you build a railroad. He was just laying there. But, of course, the fireman didn't know that, so the fireman ran back up to him, assuming that he had been hit and knocked off the track. Coming up to him, my God, man, my God, are you okay? Are you okay? Is there something I can do? The guy looks up at him, and he says, why don't you watch where you're going? And that's this week's Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Thanks for joining me. Hope hope to see you next week, when we'll probably adventure further up the Colorado River, and who knows what else your beer drinking guide will find to babble on about. Until then, keep celebrating the Great Wahoo!